Good morning. Oh, hang on. Let's turn some lights on. There we go. Now we can see each other. Good morning or afternoon. Welcome to today's live session where we're going to edit a shot to kick off our blue series, which I'll talk about in a second. And we're going to edit for a photo from Russell Ord, who's based out in Australia. Before we get to that, I just want to introduce our blue campaign. If you've been following this, you'll know that we've had a capture colors challenge and we've already been through red and green and got some great entries from that, and also given away some prizes, some Fuji cameras for the last challenge. So now what comes after red and green? No prizes for guessing that it's blue. So what have we got lined up for blue? We have got in conjunction with ProPhoto, the possibility to win a ProPhoto A10 flash, which is great. So what you need to do is shoot something along the theme of blue, share it on Histogram with a caption that includes capture colors, and tag us at Capture One Pro, easy to remember, and what camera you used out of interest as well. And then you'll be in the process of being able to win a ProPhoto A10 flash. And then you've got till, well, almost a full month until the end of March on the 28th, where we shall pick a winner and you'll be the lucky recipient of the ProPhoto A10. So look out for more content coming this week, this month, on the theme of blue. Do follow us on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, of course, so you can keep up to date. So with that in mind, to kick this off, I picked something bluish. It's not especially blue, but it's the sea, so I thought that was a good tenuous enough link. But this is a nice little simple shot to edit. Great photo. This is as it came out of camera, as you can see. Action shot of our man on this incredibly intimidating wave, I would say, shot with a Fuji X-T2, as you can see. And let's go ahead and start editing it. So first thing that we can see is that white balance wise, now we could go all kinds of directions with this photo. As you can see from my edited one, I went in that direction. I just preferred it to be a bit warmer and a bit more miserable and intimidating than something a bit brighter, but to be honest, we could go anyway. So I pulled the white balance more over in this direction. You can actually see, if you look at the histogram, how the blue and red separates out, so they're not bunched together. This would indicate, if I go in this direction, see how they match up. This is probably closer to the more scientific white balance, if you like. And if we look at the figures on the sky, rather overcast day, is roughly come out to pretty much bang on. So I feel that's a good starting point. Now with color grading, we could go in a different direction if we wanted to, but I think that's a good base point. We can also see from the histogram that it's probably slightly underexposed and also a little bit flat, because we don't have any information on this side of the levels or the histogram, and nothing towards the shadow side of things as well. So I would bump up either the exposure or the brightness. Now we've got some highlights that we want to make sure we don't lose here on the foam on the sea. So if we bring up the exposure, these tend to get a bit bright a bit too quickly. So instead of that, very bright, instead of that, let's just open up the brightness so that we lift our midtones a touch, but we're not going to lose the detail or as much detail in the sea. And if you look at the RGB values, they're well and truly comfortable in range. But now doing so, if you again look at the edited one I did yesterday, contrast wise, that's quite a difference between the two. So we need to do something about the contrast. So first thing we can do is just bring out levels, is hit auto in our levels tool, and that would just bring the highlight and shadow points to either end of the histogram, generally without clipping it. If you want to be on the safe side, you could just pull them out a bit, but I might just tweak out the highlights a touch as well. So already, without not too many adjustments, what did we do? We fixed the white balance, we bumped up the brightness a bit and did the levels. We're a long way from where we started, if you see. So really, without doing a great deal, the photos come on quite a long way. I'm just going to crop it actually, because I think the panoramic or slightly more panoramic is a bit more interesting. So I'm going to go with that. Let's hide the browser so we can see a bit more photo. So what else shall we do? Well, we've got some fun stuff going on in the clouds, which we can get a bit more excitement out of. And also we've got some great contrast going in the sea. We can see the slight color shift and the shadows and so on. Now I might be hesitant to put in a bit more contrast, but let's just see very quickly. If we add some contrast, to me this starts to go a bit too dark and this starts to go a bit too bright. So I'd be very hesitant to really add too much contrast. But clarity, let's see what happens if we add some clarity. So if we boost up the clarity, that's a more sympathetic adjustment, and let's probably stop around that point, I would say. Yeah, so for the overall photo, I think that's probably enough. I wouldn't want to do any more than that, but we could probably afford to have a little bit more in this area and maybe a touch more in the sky. But for the whole photo, that's a good start point. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new field adjustment layer, and we're going to call this clarity. The reason why it's filled is that if I just press M on my keyboard so we can see the mask, it's gonna be an adjustment that's going to affect the whole photo. So now we can see what the addition of a bit more clarity could do to the rest of the shot. So if we just drag this up a little bit more, let's go to around this point. So I think it looks good on the sea here, because now we can see a good separation between the highlights and those darker parts, but it's probably a bit heavy-handed elsewhere. So if we turn this layer off and back on, we can see what it's doing. And also, it might be hard to see on your screen, but I reckon if we looked at this a bit smaller, or like on a cell phone or something like that, the addition of clarity, we might see a bit of a bright halo around these areas. So we want to avoid that. So if we right click, we can say clear mask, and now we can brush in that clarity where it sees fit. So I'd like to have some over here and maybe a bit more in the sky as well. So let's make that brush a little bit bigger. And brush size, I want to make it so I don't have to do tons of brushing, but it's not too enormous. And we're going to keep our flow fairly low, but I want this to happen quite quickly. So the low flow amount will slow down the rate at which that adjustment gets brushed in, but I think we can comfortably allow it to happen pretty quick. So we're going to bump that up a bit. So now if I just brush over here, then gradually we can just bring that extra amount of clarity just in that spot. And then I'm purposely going to go over these bits because I think they're probably lend quite well to it. And I'll avoid the highlights there just so it doesn't get too bad. 1 second. So we don't want the brightness on the scene foam to go a bit over the top. And we can probably afford a little bit just along that line as well. I won't do it on the surfer because then he might disappear into nothing. So let's see now how that looks. So if I turn the clarity off and back on, then you can see the difference. And now it looks a bit more dramatic. Now I could probably also do some in the sky. So let's make a bigger brush and turn up the flow a bit more. And let's just brush along the top. And then we're going to see those clouds a bit deeper as well. So just enough. So again, if we turn the clarity off and back on, then just affecting those areas. Nice. Let's put couple of points of contrast in like so. That's what we can afford, I think. Just saw a couple of interesting questions come up. Nigel, I'll come to yours at the end, but don't worry, you don't have to be on Instagram. Good one from Samuel. What makes your software better or different from Affinity Photo? That's a really good question, actually. Affinity Photo is a great application. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think Affinity Photo is a very good alternative to Photoshop, but it's a slightly different application in that Capture One is primarily a raw converter and works very well on editing not only single images but large batches of photos. And then you have all those additional options in there for working at speed, so like speed edit, as I said, batch editing, adding metadata, using keywords, all that kind of asset management ability as well. Remember, Affinity Photo is not an asset manager, it's a photo editing application. So there are some subtle differences and some big differences between the two. So if you think primarily Capture One is a raw converter, digital asset manager, single and batch editing tool, Affinity Photo is more of a photo editing tool, less of a raw editing tool, and more designed to work on a single photo at a time, which it does an excellent job at. So different tools for different jobs for sure. So I hope that answers your question, Samuel. Okay, so back to our shot. We're pretty much done. I think what I will do is I will add in a little bit vignetting, because I think that focuses on our subject a bit. Now we can use the vignetting tool, and we can also use the radial mask tool. If it's just a simple vignette, the vignetting tool works really well. The way it darkens the corners is generally very sympathetic to the photo, and it doesn't block up the shadows too much. It's not just a simple exposure change. It's a little bit more involved with that, and generally is very sympathetic. So if we wanted to do it this way, which was to make a new layer, and we call that radial, we're going to grab our radial mask. Our center point is this guy, or this wave. So we're going to want to draw out from the center to make our radial, and let's feather it off. I will just shift it up a bit. So a nice soft feather like so. Probably want to squish in that elliptical a bit, and then let's pop it around here. Okay, so now if we were to bring exposure down, which is generally what people do, or first stab at it when you make a radial, is to play with exposure. But if you look over here in this dark area, using exposure will drop those shadows to darkness very, very quickly. So instead of using exposure, just try and be a bit more sympathetic with other tools. So if we pull the brightness down, then that has more of an effect on the midtones. And don't forget, you can do a combination of tools. So if we brought the brightness down to something like this and thought, you know what, it's getting a bit heavy over here, we could lift up the blacks a little bit, or you could lift up the shadows. So you still get your radial effect, like so, as you can see. Like that, but we're not messing up the shadows too much. So your radial can be a whole combination of various different things. And last but not least, if we look on the background and just see what's going on there, if we pull the whites down a little bit, then we can just recover a tiny bit there. But it's nice to have that brightness to differentiate. Alrighty, last couple of questions. Bhavesh says, I'm trying to export a photo to a folder within the main folder within the image. Okay, it's a long question, Bhavesh, but I think what the easiest thing for you to do in your process recipe, if you go to the File tab and change this to Image folder for the process recipe you're using, then it will drop your export in the same place as your raw file. So it will just drop it right next to that. So that works super nice. So just use that in your process recipe. Yes, there is. Gustavo, is there a shortcut to navigate between the different tools? Yes. So if memory serves me correctly, let's see if I've got it right. I did think, or is it option 1, 2? It's in there. So let's see if we can find it. Edit keyboard shortcuts. Let's write camera. It is there. I've had a feeling it was option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but tell you what, let's see what it's called in the menu. I'm going to look like an idiot now and not be able to find it, but it's definitely possible. I just can't exactly remember where it is. It's there. Gustavo, you have to take my word for it. Have a little dig around in the menu system. What you'll find is each of the different categories. I just can't exactly remember where it is. And then you can use your shortcut keys to flick between it. I'd had a feeling it was Command Option 1 or Command Option 1. Oh, there we go. Option Command 1, 2, 3 and 4. So on a Mac it's Option Command. PC it's probably Alt and Control, I would think. So it's definitely possible, and it's definitely listed in one of these. I just can't exactly remember where it is, but it is there. And you can customize it if you can find it. So sorry about that. It's not one I use often, so it's tricky. All right, going back to Nigel's question, who asked, where is Nigel? Here he is. Is the blue competition only for Instagram? No, you can do it on Facebook as well, if you're on Facebook. So just remember to use those tags. You can join our little Facebook group, Capture One Creative Lab, which is just a fun group for sharing your photos, getting advice, talking to your peers and so on. And you could also upload photos there. So across Instagram and Facebook, that works as well. Or even Twitter. If you're on Twitter, Nigel, you can do that as well. Samuel says, can you blow out images without any pixelation? Well, if we could, then that would put an end to large format cameras. But what you can do, Samuel, is on the scale, you can go up to 300, or is it 250, I think we can enlarge by. 250% is the maximum. And I would say, as you're working with the raw data, then we do a very good job of interpolating up or interpolating down. Equally, if you go downwards, so if you were reducing the size of the picture, it's worth noting that even if you reduce the size of a picture and also enlarge the size of a picture, that can negatively affect sharpness. But also, Samuel, you can compensate for that in the adjustments tab of any given process recipe and add some output sharpening for screen or print. So when you design your process recipes, it sounds like you're in the trial, but look into those. That simply means that for each recipe, you can dial in a good amount of output sharpening that compensates for that loss of sharpness, whether you go bigger, whether you go smaller. And Bhavesh, yep, can you please share the link for the Facebook group you mentioned? Yes, we'll put it on there as well in the comments. So just stay on after we finish and it should pop up in the comments as well. All right, everybody, just to throw that slide up again. The Tell It With Colors challenge. So inline to win the Pro Photo Flash. And don't forget to tag your photos with Capture Colors and Capture One Pro as well. And then that way, good luck everybody, and then you'll have a rather nice flash to add to your collection as well. Thanks everybody for joining again today, and hope to see you all again in the future and next week. So we'll be back doing a live session roughly this time next week, probably slightly an hour later, I would say as well. Take care everyone, and see you soon. Bye now.